Okay, the next two phases I'm going to cover together, and it is associated with 1963 and then again with 1969, because a lot of this was already covered in a fair amount of detail in the history of small size currency when we get to a very detailed presentation of all of this. Still, 1963, let's start with some obvious differences here. The 1963 series. Oh, that's what it was. Okay. Yeah. Now let's just compare the two of these together here. So the 1950E to the 1963, there's a big change in how these were being made, but it wasn't totally abrupt. The old machinery continued to be used as the new continued to be developed and to gradually come online. The new method involved making things a little bit larger because of a dry process instead of a wet process. The wet would kind of contract a little bit. So you can see that the picture of Abraham Lincoln has slightly expanded. So, for example, this name, which is outside the oval, is now inside the oval. And even despite that, you see a little bit more of his chest there than you do here. Some verbiage is done away with. The whole "will pay to the bearer on demand" is done away with. Now it's just Federal Reserve note, the United States of America, $5. As if the note itself is $5. And that's pretty much about the way they're seeing it. Before, they were at least kind of acknowledging, however slightly, that the note really wasn't the $5. There was $5. It was good for $5. And that's why they had this whole long thing about being redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank, as if there was anything much different other than coins. And of course, back in the 1950s, lawful money could of course include silver coins. It wasn't gold coins after 1933, but it could still include silver coins, or even just the base metal coins of the penny and the nickel. So, but the first part, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, is the only part retained in that verbiage for the series 1963. Just, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. There it is. Legal tender means you have to accept it as payment of any debt that you have. So it's like this is money. So at any rate, because of the slightly expanded technique of doing things, there are some other differences. You look closely, you can see, for example, the building has been redrawn and it is a little bit larger than it used to be. You can still see the ghost of the big sculpture of Abraham Lincoln inside there. But you see that one's bigger. That one, there's more of the sky around it. Here, there's less of the sky because the building is bigger. And the frame had to be redrawn a little tighter around it. The big change, of course, was the addition of In God We Trust. Series 1950 and before had no In God We Trust. Series 1963 and everything after has In God We Trust. So that's pretty straightforward there. But if you look at all the rest of it, you almost wouldn't know that they redrew it. It really looks very similar, but somebody had to pretty much copy all that same scroll work. And, I mean, you can actually see it did get, like you can see this little thing right here, the whole little thing is a little bit smaller, so that just got transferred over. But there's still a lot of things that could kind of pull in, shrink up a little bit. And they had to do that on the back as well as on the front. Well, that's enough of 1950E at this point. And so, but the designs, other than the addition of In God We Trust on the back, remain essentially the same on the front. Again, all the same little contractions and so forth, and small adjustments of where things are. But again, the bigger differences are the change of this statement. All that other stuff about lawful money and gold, etc., now they're long gone. And all the paying to the bearer business, that's gone. And the new series, forces us to make things a little bit, handle things being a little bit larger. So we can look at that in a bit. But the big surprise for Series 1963 is the introduction of the $1 as a Federal Reserve note. Up until the Series 1963, the $1 had only been a silver certificate or, in one rare old case, a United States note. So that was always what it is. The front is completely different. Some interest could be how the back has converted. Now, this is the final edition of the silver certificate, so it has In God We Trust, but they still had to redraw everything. And it looks like they did a very good job of making it look like nothing changed. Probably, if you were to count all the little things in here, maybe the design is those separate. Let's see. No, it's the same. But if you were to count the little things in here, I'm sure you'd find a few more of them than you would find in here, because these are kind of bigger. And probably the same thing with more of the same design down here and here. So there's little things like that that have changed because they had to redraw it because it won't shrink anymore. So the designs as they existed were a little bit larger. But you can see it essentially has retained the same basic design that they've had since that introduced in 1935. And there it is, Granahan and Dillon, that's Series 1963. And that goes for the $1 and the $5 and the $10 and the $20. So, but they didn't make any Series 1963 no letter 50 or 100. So the next one is 1963A. The only difference from the 63 and 63A, other than the addition of the larger denominations at last, because they were still being produced as parts of Series 1950D and E, was the change of the signature of the Secretary of the Treasury. So 63A now all has Henry Fowler along with Granahan. So there's the $5. 63A is Henry Fowler. Everything else is the same. 63A, everything is the same. Okay. And 63A, everything is the same. And, but now 63A, we're able to start adding the $50. So they started this time, instead of starting with 63 like they did in 1928, this time they just simply kept the letters in sync. So now everything is 63A. When the 50 and the 100 are introduced, they're introduced as 63As. The final little capstone on 60 and Series 1963 is, of course, the Barr note, Joseph W. Barr in 1963B. He was in for about 1 month, and strictly speaking, Granahan was already no longer there. But at any rate, this was kind of the last of the era of the Johnson administration. So that only exists as a $1. So that's a very tiny, short-lived phase, and it's the only denomination or series that has Joseph W. Barr on it. That's why they call them the Barr notes. So now we move on to the 1969. Now, 1969, other than to change the signatures, and in this case, both of them, because now we've moved from the Johnson administration to the Nixon administration. So you got a major administration change from Democrat to Republican. So you have all new people. You've got Dorothy Elston on the one side and David M. Kennedy on the other. It's now Series 1969. And the other really big change for Series 1969 is the redesigned seal of the Treasury. So the old design goes back to just, I think, the very beginning of seals, whatever color they may be, and whatever things there may be surrounding it, to this new design here. It's kind of simplified, and it's all in English where it says the Department of the Treasury, and in 1789, and all these weights and measures and keys and so forth. A lot of that was still in there, but you can see how the whole design is simplified. For the back, there's no discernible changes from the 1963. So let's just march through all of these. So the $5 for 1969, and then the $10, Elston and Kennedy for 1969. No change there. $20, Elston and Kennedy again. No particular design there. You may remember this or something very like it. It would have been a little smaller, but virtually identical in all the respects. Was introduced with the midst of 1934C. And here we go again, the $50. And here we go right away with the $50 and the $100 in series 1969, again with Elston and Kennedy. So everything's consistent all the way across. So now this is the most unique reason for a name change, namely Dorothy Elston Kennedy, Elston married and became Dorothy Andrews Kabis. So same person, and you can see that the handwriting is though not absolutely identical, it is the same person. So now we have Kabis, but to show Kabis while Kennedy is still in there, was only done on the $1 1969A. Now for some reason in 1969 they let the letters get out of sync. So when we have a new Secretary of the Treasury, Connally, at 69B for the $1, you see nothing else has changed. The other denominations for John Connally, Kabis and Connally are now all 69A. Nothing else has changed. So 69A, Connally, Kabis, nothing else has changed. 69A, Kabis and Connally. 69A, Kabis and Connally. 69A, Kabis and Connally. Okay. Now, the next signature combination, we replace Kabis with Bañuelos. But that's all. That's 69C. And the 5, though, is now a letter behind, 69B, Bañuelos and Connally. But other than that, no other differences. And $10, Bañuelos and Connally, 69B. And $20, 69B. Now, apparently this combination wasn't around very long. So even the $50 is a little hard to find with Bañuelos and Connally, 69B, but at least that exists. And then you finally get to the last. Now the $1 goes all the way up to 1969D, and now Bañuelos is supplemented by Shultz. So 1969D is Bañuelos and Shultz. And this continues all through the rest of the Nixon and Ford eras. So, Bañuelos and Shultz, 1969C for all the other denominations. But no other changes. These are just changes of signatures as the various officers get replaced and or otherwise leave and have to be replaced. So, Bañuelos and Shultz for the $20. Bañuelos and Shultz. See, and now you can see In God We Trust here, which I don't know if I ever showed that here. In God We Trust. That's true. All of these, see, In God We Trust. And we saw In God We Trust there, and In God We Trust here. And this went for all of 1963. And so now we get down to the $100. Bañuelos and Shultz. And it still is In God We Trust. And the only other mildly interesting thing here is that this one signature combination, they didn't need to make any 100s. Well, the next era we'll be introducing will be the series 1974, and we'll get more into that later on. That's the next one. So, thanks for listening.